Devotion often wears a mask. It mimics care while concealing absolute control. A mother's embrace can easily become a suffocating grip. Anna built her entire universe around a single axis. That axis was her son, Victor. She did not merely raise him, she engineered him. For 25 years, every choice she made was a calculated sacrifice. She surrendered her youth, her career, and her personal life. These were not acts of pure selflessness. They were deposits into a psychological bank account. She expected a massive return on her investment. Victor was destined for the elite class. He was her ticket out of obscurity. He was the living proof of her superiority. The flawless blueprint shattered on a rainy autumn evening. Victor unlocked the front door and ushered a stranger into the hallway. Her name was Sarah. She possessed a quiet, unassuming demeanor. Her hands were rough from working long shifts at a local textile factory. She had no pedigree. She lacked influential connections. Her dreams extended no further than a warm home and a loyal partner. Anna looked at the girl and saw a parasite. In her mind, Sarah was an anchor threatening to drag her golden boy down into the swamp of mediocrity. The mother's pride flared up instantly. It was not a hot, explosive rage. It was a cold, surgical determination to eliminate the threat. The campaign of destruction began the very next morning. Anna never raised her voice. She used the refined weapons of a martyr. A slightly overcooked dinner became a tragic symbol of Victor's compromised future. Sarah's modest wardrobe was met with heavy, theatrical sighs. Anna rearranged the furniture while Sarah was at work, erasing the young woman's presence from the apartment. She isolated the bride systematically. During family dinners, Anna steered conversations toward high art, complex financial markets, and elite university memories. She deliberately used terminology Sarah could not understand. When Sarah remained silent, Anna offered a patronizing smile of fake sympathy. She was showing Victor the intellectual chasm between him and his wife. The cruelty was entirely wrapped in the language of maternal concern. Anna would whisper in the kitchen, asking Victor if he felt intellectually starved. She left brochures for luxury real estate on the coffee table, casually noting that a factory worker's salary would never secure such a future. She was not attacking Sarah directly. She was dismantling Victor's respect for her. The strategy relied on one crucial flaw in Victor's character. He possessed a brilliant academic mind, but a remarkably fragile spine. Decades of micromanagement had crippled his ability to defy his mother. He had been conditioned to view her approval as the ultimate measure of right and wrong. Slowly, the poison of comparison took effect. Victor began to notice the rough hands. He started apologizing to his colleagues for his wife's lack of sophistication. He stopped holding her hand in public. He became annoyed by her simple joys. The breaking point materialized on their second wedding anniversary. Anna orchestrated a masterful final strike. She purchased a highly exclusive networking cruise ticket for Victor. There was only one ticket. She claimed it was a rare professional opportunity he could not miss. She looked Sarah directly in the eyes and explained that spouses were not invited to such high-level corporate events. Victor hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then, he packed his suitcase. He chose ambition and maternal approval over his marriage vows. Sarah did not cry. She watched the taxi take her husband to the airport. The next morning, she gathered her few belongings. She left the expensive jewelry Victor had bought her on the kitchen counter. She took only the things she had brought into the house. She walked out the door and vanished into the city. Anna stood in the suddenly quiet apartment. She felt the intoxicating rush of a general surveying a conquered territory. She picked up Sarah's forgotten coffee mug and threw it into the trash bin. The infection had been cured. The path to greatness was clear once more. She began polishing the antique silver, preparing the table for the wealthy, high-status bride her son truly deserved. She believed she had saved him. She did not realize she had just laid the foundation for her own future ruin. The heavy oak door slammed shut. Sarah was gone. Anna wiped her hands, utterly convinced she had just saved her son's future. She had cleared the path of an unworthy distraction. Now, Victor could ascend. She believed she had orchestrated a masterpiece of maternal protection. In reality, she had just severed his last anchor to genuine human connection. Victor moved to the capital. The metropolis demanded a completely different currency. Hard work was no longer enough. Pedigree mattered. Social connections dictated success. He secured a junior position at a top-tier investment firm. The towering glass walls reflected a world he desperately wanted to own. He watched the senior partners closely. He studied their tailored suits. He memorized their casual, polished arrogance. Morality quickly became a liability. Empathy slowed him down. Victor adapted with frightening speed. He systematically erased his provincial accent. He stopped mentioning his mother's modest apartment. The transformation did not happen overnight. It was a series of small, silent compromises. First, he skipped a promised weekend visit home. A networking golf tournament took priority. Anna forgave him instantly. She praised his ambition. She fed her own pride with his excuses, bragging to neighbors about his crucial meetings. She did not realize she was actively funding her own obsolescence. Victor learned the dark art of strategic silence. He watched senior managers ruthlessly ruin competitors. Soon he participated. He drafted the very contracts that bankrupted small family businesses. Any initial guilt faded after the first few transactions. The bonuses grew larger. His bank account swelled. His conscience shrank. He convinced himself this was simply evolution, survival of the most adaptable. Then Camilla appeared. She was the daughter of the firm's principal shareholder. She lacked warmth. She possessed absolute, undeniable power. A relationship with her guaranteed a fast track to partnership. Victor made his calculation. Love was a highly volatile, poor investment. Status offered guaranteed, compounding returns. He proposed after exactly 6 months. The engagement ring cost 3 years of his mother's pension. He paid for it with his first major corporate bonus. The wedding was not a celebration. It was a strategic acquisition merger. The guest list included politicians, tycoons, and media moguls. Anna received an invitation. It came with a strict dress code and a designated seat in the 3rd row. The wedding day highlighted the massive chasm between his past and present. Anna arrived in a dress she had spent months sewing by hand. It looked painfully out of place among the designer gowns. Victor felt a sudden, sharp sting of irritation. He was not angry at the superficial crowd. He was angry at his mother. She was a walking, breathing reminder of his humble beginnings. He introduced her quickly to a few minor guests. He ushered her away from the main tables. He chose his newly crafted image over her fundamental dignity. Camilla accelerated his moral decay. She viewed people strictly as assets or liabilities. Victor's past was a glaring liability. She subtly restructured his entire life. She replaced his old friends with useful, high-net-worth contacts. She dictated his wardrobe choices. She curated his political opinions. Victor surrendered willingly. The velvet comfort of the elite circle numbed any lingering regrets. The social elevator moved at a dizzying speed. The doors closed, leaving Anna permanently on the ground floor. Victor's phone calls grew incredibly rare. "I am busy," became his universal, impenetrable shield. He moved into a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city skyline. His new family found Anna embarrassing. Camilla tolerated her mother-in-law exactly twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Even then, the visits were strictly timed. 2 hours maximum. No personal questions allowed. Years passed. Victor became a managing partner. He had a private driver. He managed a vast portfolio of international properties. He also had a marriage completely devoid of intimacy. Camilla and he operated as a highly efficient corporate alliance. They shared a complex schedule, not a life. Anna's health eventually began to fail. The medical bills piled up rapidly. Victor paid them promptly. He transferred funds through his executive assistant. He completely outsourced his filial duty. He genuinely believed money could buy absolution. He refused to visit the hospital ward. The sharp smell of antiseptic reminded him of human fragility. He despised vulnerability in any form. Victor sat in his leather chair, looking down at the glittering city lights. He had won the game. He held all the valuable chips. Yet, the silence in his massive office was deafening. He had systematically cut away every genuine connection to reach the summit. Now, he was entirely alone. The social elevator had only one direction: up. It offered absolutely no way back down to the people he had left behind. The transaction was final. There were no refunds in this market. The heavy oak door clicked shut. The sound severed 60 years of a carefully constructed life. Anna stared at the peeling floral wallpaper. She had sacrificed everything to mold her son, Victor, into a masterpiece of success. Today, that masterpiece signed the admission papers to Pine Rest. This facility sat 50 miles outside the city limits. It was a holding pen for the forgotten. A chilling question hung in the stale air. Anna faced the immediate prospect of fading into absolute, undocumented oblivion. Victor did not look back. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke suit. His luxury sedan idled in the cracked asphalt driveway. He had justified this exile using smooth corporate logic. His new high society wife required the estate's master suite. Their demanding schedule of charity galas left no room for an aging mother. Anna herself had taught him to ruthlessly eliminate obstacles. She simply never anticipated becoming one. The intake process resembled a prison booking. An indifferent administrator confiscated her leather handbag. Her tailored silk blouses were folded away into a plastic bin. They were immediately replaced by generic, faded cotton gowns. The system systematically stripped away her identity. She was no longer a respected matriarch. She was simply the occupant of bed number 42. Pine Rest offered zero comfort. The corridors smelled of boiled cabbage and cheap floor wax. Overworked staff moved with mechanical detachment. Anna's assigned room featured a single, narrow window. It framed a dying elm tree. The silence inside felt physical. It pressed heavily against her chest. Occasional shuffling footsteps from the hallway only emphasized her profound isolation. This sterile environment was the final invoice for her blind devotion. Anna sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. Her mind sifted through the wreckage of her choices. She vividly recalled orchestrating the departure of Sarah, Victor's first wife. That manipulation was framed as maternal protection. She believed she was securing a grand dynasty. Instead, she had engineered a sociopath. Victor's relentless ambition had entirely consumed his capacity for empathy. The immense pride she once felt in his corporate promotions now tasted like ash. Her supposed unconditional love had merely been a disguise for absolute control. She had watered a poisonous plant. Now, she was forced to consume its bitter fruit. Days dissolved into weeks. The visitor log remained entirely empty. The plastic telephone on her nightstand never rang. Anna quickly learned the rigid, unforgiving routine of the facility. Breakfast arrived exactly at 8 in the morning. The main lights clicked off at 9 in the evening. There was no space for personal preference. Human dignity was a luxury the budget did not cover. The irony of her punishment was mathematically precise. For decades, she had evaluated people based solely on their social utility. Now, society deemed her entirely useless. Victor had absorbed her ruthless lessons with flawless accuracy. He liquidated her presence like an underperforming corporate asset. During the long nights, she stared at the water stains on the ceiling. There was no external enemy to blame. The architecture of her ruin was entirely self-designed. She had traded genuine human connection for a facade of perfection. The facade had crumbled. Only the cold foundation remained. She accepted this concrete box as her tomb. Her carefully planned universe had collapsed into a 12 by 12-foot square. She prepared to surrender to the quiet dark. She expected nothing but the slow decay of her own memories. Yet, the universe rarely operates on a straight line. The echo of her past actions had not entirely faded. A different kind of consequence was already in motion, moving quietly toward the gates of Pine Rest. The heavy doors of the state facility offered no comfort. Rain beat against the cracked window of room number 42. An elderly woman sat staring at the peeling wallpaper. She expected nothing. Her son had stopped visiting months ago. The staff spoke to her only in commands. Then, the door opened. A woman stepped inside. She wore a tailored charcoal coat. Her posture radiated quiet authority. It was Sarah, the same girl cast out 10 years ago for being unworthy. The power dynamic shifted in a single second. The mother shrank back into her thin mattress. Recognition flashed in her faded eyes. Fear followed immediately. She remembered her own harsh words. She remembered mocking Sarah's cheap clothes and simple background. She remembered orchestrating the divorce. Now, the roles were completely reversed. The strong punish the weak. That was the only rule the old woman understood. She waited for the verdict. Rejection is a brutal teacher. It strips away illusions. Sarah did not waste the past decade on resentment. She used the pain as fuel. She built a career in healthcare administration. She learned to manage clinics. She learned to manage people. The weeping, insecure girl was gone. In her place stood a professional. She understood systems. She understood power. Currently, she sat on the regional medical board. This forgotten nursing home fell under her direct jurisdiction. Sarah pulled up a chair. She did not smile. She did not gloat. Gloating requires emotional attachment. Sarah had severed those ties long ago. She looked at the frail figure before her. There was no monster left. There was only a broken woman, betrayed by the very son she had worshipped. Sarah opened a leather folder. She placed a document on the metal table. "Your son canceled the payments," Sarah said. Her voice was even. "The administration planned to relocate you tomorrow to the general ward." The mother closed her eyes. The ultimate humiliation was complete. Delivered by the hands of the victim. She prepared for the final blow. She expected Sarah to sign the transfer order. It would be the perfect revenge. Sarah picked up her pen. She crossed out the general ward transfer. She wrote a new directive. "I have arranged a transfer to the Cedar Wing," Sarah stated. "It is a private room. The medical care is fully funded." True forgiveness is not a tearful embrace. It is the refusal to continue the cycle of destruction. Sarah did not save her former mother-in-law out of love. She did it to preserve her own humanity. Vengeance anchors a person to the past. Mercy cuts the rope. By signing those papers, Sarah finalized her own liberation. She proved that her worth was never defined by this woman's approval. She possessed the power to destroy, and she chose to build. The old woman opened her eyes. Shock replaced the fear. She looked at the document. Then she looked at Sarah. The silence in the room grew heavy. The mother realized the absolute poverty of her own life philosophy. She had traded a loyal daughter-in-law for a wealthy one. She had taught her son to value status over character. That lesson had left her abandoned in a decaying room. Sarah's mercy highlighted the mother's failure more clearly than any punishment ever could. A trembling hand reached out. The old woman did not try to touch Sarah. She knew she had lost that right. Instead, she reached under her pillow. She pulled out a small, heavy object wrapped in a faded scarf. She pushed it across the metal table. "Take it," the mother whispered. Her voice was rough from disuse. Sarah looked at the object. She unwrapped the fabric. Inside lay an antique wooden box. The corners were reinforced with tarnished brass. The mother had guarded it fiercely for decades. Even Victor did not know its true contents. He believed it held worthless family trinkets. This was not a simple gift of gratitude. It was a surrender. The mother was relinquishing the last piece of her authority. She was handing over the hidden foundation of their family history. Sarah touched the brass latch. She did not know it yet, but the contents of this box would rewrite the future for all of them. The past was settled. A new chapter was about to begin. The wooden box had sat at the bottom of a worn leather suitcase for 3 decades. Its brass hinges were oxidized black. Inside lay not jewelry, but a thick stack of yellowed papers. Sarah unfolded the brittle documents on the scarred kitchen table. The faded ink revealed a deed to a plot of land on the city's southern edge. The mother had purchased it 35 years ago. It was a forgotten asset, buried during her long pursuit of prestige. Victor had ignored its existence when he systematically drained her accounts for his social ascent. Now, this neglected acreage was their only leverage against absolute ruin. The pressing issue was whether dirt and a ruined stone foundation could translate into survival. The land was raw. It lacked plumbing and paved access. It consisted of 2 acres of overgrown weeds. The current market value was incredibly low due to the lack of infrastructure. Selling it would barely cover 6 months of rent. Sarah saw a different metric. They did not need a buyer. They needed a permanent sanctuary. The utility of the land far outweighed its liquid value. The mother watched Sarah trace the property lines on the map. The older woman's hands trembled. They were stripped of their former manicured authority. She had once judged Sarah relentlessly for her lack of elite pedigree. She had engineered Sarah's initial exile from the family. Now, pedigree meant absolutely nothing. Survival required brutal pragmatism. Sarah did not gloat over this total reversal of power. She operated with cold, efficient grace. She organized the paperwork. She calculated decades of back taxes. She contacted local zoning boards. The dynamic between them shifted permanently. The toxic hierarchy collapsed, replaced by a strict alliance of necessity. Liquidating the mother's few remaining personal artifacts provided the initial seed capital. 2 heavy gold rings and a vintage mechanical watch funded the clearing of the land. A local crew arrived with heavy machinery to remove the decades of debris. Underneath the overgrowth, the old stone foundation from a previous century proved structurally sound. The surveyors confirmed its integrity. It became the literal base for a modest, prefabricated timber frame house. The construction took exactly 4 months. During this period, the internal architecture of their relationship underwent a parallel reconstruction. Anna faced a severe psychological detox. Stripped of her societal armor, she had to confront the emptiness of her past values. She learned to peel potatoes without commenting on the quality of the knife. She learned to accept a simple cup of tea without criticizing the brew. The heavy silence between the 2 women gradually lost its hostility. It transformed into a space for quiet, necessary reflection. The mother realized her previous life was built on the illusion of control. This new life demanded actual participation. Sarah utilized her hard-won independence. She had spent the years after her painful rejection building a resilient freelance career in financial consulting. Her income was steady and location independent. She moved her digital workspace to the finished timber house. She became the primary breadwinner, managing the macroeconomics of their survival. The mother took over the microeconomics and physical maintenance. She broke the fertile soil behind the house. She planted a vast, structured garden. She grew tomatoes, medicinal herbs, and root vegetables. This was not a leisurely hobby. It was a calculated strategy to reduce their grocery expenses to near zero. Every harvested vegetable represented a small, tangible victory over their past dependence on Victor's conditional wealth. The physical labor grounded her. The soil under her fingernails replaced the expensive manicures. The daily routine of watering and weeding provided a new, honest rhythm to her existence. By the second autumn, the property had completely transformed. The timber house weathered to a natural, soft gray, blending into the landscape. The garden yielded a massive surplus. Sarah applied her business acumen to this excess. She secured a stall at the weekend farmers market. The mother managed the physical sales. She engaged directly with customers. Her former rigid arrogance dissolved into genuine community interaction. The hollow pride she once derived from her son's elite status vanished. It was replaced by the tangible, heavy weight of coins earned through direct, honest labor. They built a fortress of absolute self-reliance. The foundation was no longer hidden beneath weeds and forgotten deeds. It was highly visible. It manifested in the neatly stacked cords of firewood, the hundreds of preserved jars in the pantry, and the steady, unbreakable rhythm of their daily routine. They had successfully engineered a life completely immune to the whims of social climbers and status seekers. The trauma of the mother's exile and Sarah's past rejection served as the mortar for their new reality. Peace settled over the 2 acres. The past seemed permanently severed, buried under the weight of their current stability. Stability often acts as a powerful beacon. A well-lit, warm house in the dark inevitably attracts those wandering in the cold. The new foundation was rock solid. Yet, it was about to be severely tested by an unavoidable echo from the life they thought they had left behind permanently. A heavy knock echoed through the hallway of the newly built estate. Outside in the freezing rain stood the man who had traded his family for a corner office. The mother now faced the ultimate test. She looked through the peephole at the son for whom she had once sacrificed her entire existence. Victor's bespoke wool suit hung heavy with cold water. His luxury sedan had been repossessed exactly 3 weeks ago. The corporate empire he married into had collapsed under the weight of federal audits. His high society wife filed for divorce the morning the bank froze their joint accounts. Victor had climbed the social ladder by stepping directly on his mother's devotion. He had discarded his first wife to secure a seat at a richer table. Now, the ladder had snapped. He possessed nothing but a cheap travel bag and a desperate need for a roof. The heavy oak door swung open. The older woman studied the shivering figure on her porch. There was no gasp of horror. There were no tears of pity. The sterile walls of the forgotten nursing home had burned away her blind maternal worship long ago. She saw him clearly for the first time. He was not a flawless golden child. He was simply a middle-aged man, broken by his own greed. Behind her in the warm hallway stood Sarah. The once-rejected daughter-in-law held a clipboard with the farm's inventory. Her posture radiated calm authority. The house around them was a fortress of comfort. It was entirely funded by the sale of the land deeds found in the old wooden box. They had built this sanctuary on a strict foundation of mutual respect. There was no room here for toxic attachments or unearned privileges. Victor cleared his throat. He offered a carefully rehearsed apology. He spoke of temporary financial setbacks. He requested the guest bedroom for a few months to get back on his feet. His tone carried a familiar, arrogant expectation. He still believed his mother's forgiveness was a guaranteed commodity. He waited for the usual rush of frantic coddling. He expected Sarah to lower her eyes and shrink into the background. The silence stretched. The rain battered the porch roof. The older woman did not reach out to touch his wet cheek. She did not invite him into the heated foyer. Instead, she pointed toward the vast, uncultivated field adjacent to their new commercial greenhouses. She offered him a choice, not a rescue. He could work the soil. He could earn his daily meals and a minimum wage as a farmhand. There would be no place for him in the main house. A drafty caretaker's cabin sat at the far edge of the property. That was her only offer. She would not finance his illusions any longer. Sarah stepped forward. She pulled a heavy iron key from her pocket and held it out. She did not smile. She did not gloat over his ruin. Her victory lay in her complete emotional detachment. She had rebuilt her identity from the ashes of his betrayal. Today, she was the legal co-owner of this thriving agricultural business. Victor had to look his former victim in the eye. He had to reach out and accept her strict terms. Victor stared at the cold metal key resting in Sarah's palm. The illusion of his inherent superiority shattered completely. He had chased elite status his entire adult life. He had betrayed every moral obligation to secure a penthouse view. His strategy had yielded total bankruptcy. Now, his physical survival depended on becoming a day laborer on his ex-wife's farm. He slowly raised his hand and took the key. His shoulders slumped in total defeat. He turned away from the warm light of the hallway. He began the long, muddy walk toward the dark cabin at the edge of the woods. The storm swallowed his silhouette. The mother watched him go. She did not call out to stop him. She gently pushed the heavy front door. The brass latch clicked shut with absolute finality. She turned back to Sarah. They walked together toward the kitchen to review the morning's harvest logs. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and dried herbs. Anna sat at the heavy oak table. She felt a strange, unfamiliar lightness in her chest. The crushing weight of her lifelong hypervigilance had vanished. She no longer felt responsible for Victor's happiness. He was a separate entity now. His failures belonged entirely to him. Sarah poured 2 cups of hot tea. They did not discuss the man walking through the mud outside. There was nothing left to analyze. The past had been fully settled. The mother had finally learned the hardest lesson of parenthood. True love sometimes requires letting a child face the brutal impact of their own actions. Her past pride had nearly destroyed them all. Now, her boundaries protected their future. The boomerang of fate had completed its long, devastating circle. Every character had received exactly what they had cultivated. The ruthless climber found himself at the very bottom. The discarded victims had become the masters of the estate. The soil of their new life was finally ready for a clean, honest season.